The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any cathedral on Earth. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the entrance, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Above her, the dome displayed 1,000 stars, each one representing a member species of the Great Alliance that ruled this section of space. Today, humanity would add its own star to that collection. Sarah walked forward on the crystal floor. Her shoes made soft clicking sounds that echoed in the massive room. Around the circular chamber, representatives from dozens of species watched her approach. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few existed as clouds of glowing gas contained in transparent suits. But all of them watched the human with the same expression that Sarah had learned to recognize over the past months. Curiosity mixed with something else, something that looked like contempt. At the center of the chamber sat the Great Three. These were the powers that truly controlled the council. Everyone knew it. The Kresh Empire held military dominance with their 7-foot-tall warriors covered in armored plates. The Volian Consortium controlled trade routes and economy, with their 4-armed bodies built for calculation and greed. The Sethian hegemony provided diplomacy and law with their serpentine forms and forked tongues that spoke in measured tones. War Chief Krathak of the Kresh leaned forward on his throne, his red eyes fixed on Sarah like a predator studying prey. "So the humans finally arrived to join us," he said, his voice rumbling through the chamber. "Tell me, Ambassador Chen, what does your species offer to this council?" Sarah had prepared for this moment. She had rehearsed her speech 100 times. But standing here, seeing the barely hidden smirks on faces that thought humanity was nothing special, she felt anger rise in her chest. She pushed it down, smiled, and began to speak. "We offer friendship," she said. "We offer our resources, our knowledge, and our commitment to peace among the stars." Merchant Prince Volix of the Volians made a chittering sound that might have been laughter. "Resources? Your worlds are in the outer territories. Knowledge? You have only just discovered faster than light travel. Peace?" He gestured with 2 of his 4 arms. "What threat could you possibly pose that would make your peace valuable?" The other species in the chamber made sounds of agreement. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she kept smiling. This was exactly what Earth's government had warned her about. The galaxy saw humanity as newcomers, as children who needed to be taught their place. Arbiter Zeltoth of the Sethians raised one clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent. His scales shimmered green and gold as he spoke. "The Council welcomes humanity," he said, though his tone suggested he was merely following protocol. "However, as a new species, you must understand certain realities. The territories near Earth are considered frontier zones, dangerous, unstable. Until humanity proves itself worthy of better placement, you will be assigned these marginal systems." Sarah opened her mouth to object, but Zeltoth continued. "Additionally, your military forces will be limited to defensive capabilities only. No more than 50 vessels of war. Your trade agreements will be reviewed by the Volian Consortium, with appropriate taxation for the privilege of accessing established markets. And your voting power in the Council will be restricted for the first decade of membership." Each word felt like a slap. Sarah had read the treaties of other species who joined the Council. None of them had faced such harsh restrictions, but around the chamber she saw only indifference. This was how they treated those they considered weak. "Do you accept these terms, Ambassador Chen?" War Chief Krathak asked. He was grinning now, showing teeth designed for tearing meat. "Or does humanity wish to remain isolated in your little corner of space?" Sarah thought about the people watching back on Earth. She thought about the colonies struggling to establish themselves on new worlds. She thought about the children who would grow up among the stars. And she thought about what the president had told her before she left. Sometimes, he had said, patience is the greatest weapon we have. She smiled wider, though it hurt her face to do so. "We accept," she said. "Humanity is grateful for this opportunity." The council members made various sounds of approval. They thought they had won. They thought they had put the humans in their place. Only Arbiter Zeltoth seemed troubled, his forked tongue flickering as he studied Sarah's expression. Over the next weeks, Sarah worked through the details of Earth's integration into the Galactic Council. Every meeting brought new insults disguised as standard procedure. Every negotiation revealed how little the other species thought of humanity. The Kresh officers who inspected human ships treated the crews like criminals. The Valian merchants charged prices that were clearly unfair. The Scythian diplomat spoke to Sarah as if explaining simple concepts to a child. And through it all, Sarah smiled and nodded and signed the documents they put in front of her. One evening, as she sat alone in her quarters aboard the human embassy station, her assistant Marcus brought her a report. "Ma'am, I've been keeping count like you asked," he said. "In the past month, we've filed 47 formal complaints about treaty violations. The Council has dismissed 46 of them." Sarah took the report and read through the list. Harassment of human freighters, illegal seizure of mining equipment, accidental weapon discharges near human colonies. Each incident carefully documented. Each complaint politely filed and officially ignored. "Keep counting," she told Marcus. "Record everything. Every insult, every crime, every moment they think we're too weak to matter." "Why?" Marcus asked. "If they're not listening, why keep track?" Sarah looked out the window at the stars. "Because we're patient," she said. "But we're not fools. One day they'll push too far, and when that day comes, we'll remember all of it." Back on Earth, in secret facilities, humanity began to build. Ships that looked like civilian vessels but could transform in moments. Weapons that combined human creativity with stolen alien technology. Training programs that took soldiers and made them into something the galaxy had never seen. The other species saw only smiling human faces and mistook patience for weakness. They would learn their mistake. But not yet. Not today. Today humanity would endure and watch and remember. The countdown had begun. Captain James Rodriguez gripped the armrests of his command chair as the Kresh warship approached. Through the view screen, he could see the massive vessel, 3 times the size of his cargo hauler. Its weapons were active, targeting systems locked onto his ship. This was the 5th inspection in 2 months. "Captain, they're demanding we cut engines and prepare for boarding," his communications officer said. Her voice was steady, but James could hear the fear underneath. They all knew what these inspections meant. Delays that cost money, cargo that mysteriously disappeared, crew members roughed up for no reason except to prove who had the power. "Comply," James said. He wanted to run, to fight, to do anything except submit again. But Earth's orders were clear. Avoid conflict. Document everything. Stay alive. He activated the recording systems, making sure every camera on the ship was capturing what happened next. The Kresh boarding party arrived in a burst of magnetic locks and hissing airlocks. 6 warriors in full combat armor stomped through the corridors of James's ship. Their leader, an officer with scars covering his faceplates, didn't bother with pleasantries. "You are transporting goods through Kresh space without proper authorization," the officer declared. James pulled up his navigation logs on a datapad. "We filed our flight plan 2 weeks ago. We have approval codes from the Galactic Trade Authority. Everything is legal." The Kresh officer knocked the datapad from James's hands. It clattered across the floor. "Your codes are outdated. New regulations went into effect yesterday. You will surrender half your cargo as a fine, or we will impound your entire ship." Yesterday. Of course the new regulations went into effect yesterday. James felt his hands forming fists, but he forced them to relax. 20 crew members depended on him making the right choice. "We'll surrender the cargo," he said quietly. The Kresh took more than half. They always did. As they hauled away containers that represented months of work, James made sure every moment was recorded. Another crime to add to humanity's growing list. Across human space, the same scenes played out hundreds of times. Merchant ships stopped and robbed. Mining operations shut down for safety violations that didn't exist. Human colonists told their land was suddenly needed for Kresh military exercises. And every time, humanity filed complaints with the Council. Complaints that vanished into bureaucratic silence. Ambassador Chen stood before the Council once again. She had stood here so many times now that she knew every face, every expression of boredom or contempt. Today, she carried a report 300 pages long, detailing 6 months of systematic harassment. "The Kresh Empire is violating treaty provisions," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "They are attacking human vessels, seizing human property, and ignoring all established trade laws. We demand action." War Chief Krathak didn't even look up from the datapad he was reading. "Ambassador Chen, the Kresh military is simply enforcing security protocols in a dangerous region of space. If human vessels were operating legally, they would have nothing to fear. We have approval codes. We follow every regulation. Then perhaps your people are simply incompetent at following procedures, Krathak said. Now he did look up, and he was smiling. The galaxy is a complex place, Ambassador. Not everyone is suited for it. Chen felt something crack inside her chest, but she kept her voice level. We request a formal investigation. Arbiter Zeltoth sighed, a long hissing sound. Ambassador, the Council has reviewed your previous complaints. We find insufficient evidence of systematic wrongdoing. Individual incidents may occur, but these do not constitute a pattern requiring intervention. Your request is denied. Sarah walked out of the chamber with her head high, but her hands were shaking. In her office, she added this meeting to the list. Complaint number 273 denied. Like all the others, the Valian Consortium joined the game with enthusiasm. They imposed tariffs that made human goods worthless in galactic markets. When human merchants protested, the Valians pointed to fine print in contracts written in languages Earth hadn't fully translated yet. Legal, they said. All perfectly legal. Human colonies struggling to establish themselves on frontier worlds found their supply lines strangled. Ships carrying medicine, food, and equipment were delayed for weeks by customs procedures. Children went hungry. Sick people waited for treatments that sat in warehouses light years away. And humanity filed more complaints that no one read. Then came the day that changed everything for James Rodriguez. His ship was carrying medical supplies to a colony struggling with an outbreak of lung disease. The cargo was time-sensitive, life-saving. He had every possible permit, every authorization, every piece of paperwork filed in triplicate. The Kresh warship appeared as his vessel entered the system. The same scarred officer as before led the boarding party. But this time something was different. James saw it in their eyes, in the way they moved. This wasn't harassment. This was something worse. Captain Rodriguez, the Kresh officer said, "Your vessel is suspected of smuggling weapons. We are confiscating this ship and its cargo pending investigation. These are medical supplies. People are dying. Then they will die," the officer interrupted. "Your ship now belongs to the Kresh Empire. You and your crew will be transported to a detention facility." James's crew fought. They had no weapons, no combat training, but they fought anyway. The Kresh warriors cut them down with casual efficiency. James watched his communications officer, the woman who had served with him for 5 years, die from a plasma bolt to the chest. He watched his engineer, a grandfather who told terrible jokes, fall to the deck and stop moving. A Kresh warrior grabbed James and dragged him toward the airlock. Through his ship's corridors, he saw the bodies of his crew. 23 people, friends, family, dead because they tried to protect medical supplies. The warrior threw James into an escape pod and launched it. As the pod drifted away, James watched through the small window as the Kresh warship opened fire on his vessel. The cargo hauler exploded in a ball of flame, destroying the evidence of what happened here, erasing the medical supplies that would have saved lives. But they had missed something. James still wore his captain's insignia, and built into that insignia was a recorder that had captured everything. Every word, every murder, every moment of casual cruelty. When a human patrol ship found his pod 3 days later, James was barely alive. But he was alive, and he had evidence that not even the Council could ignore. Ambassador Chen stood before the Council with James Rodriguez beside her. He was still weak from his ordeal, but he stood straight as the recording played for every species to see. The chamber watched in silence as Kresh warriors murdered unarmed humans, as medical supplies meant to save children burned in space, as an officer laughed about filing a report claiming the human ship had fired first. When the recording ended, Chen spoke. "Complaint number 847, she said. Will this one also be denied?" Arbiter Zeltoth wouldn't meet her eyes. "The Council will review this matter and issue a response within 60 days. 60 days. More delays, more empty promises." Sarah looked at James, at this man who had lost everything, and she saw her own rage reflected in his eyes. Around the galaxy, millions of humans watched this moment and felt that same rage building. The countdown continued. New Haven was the pride of humanity's colonial effort. 3 million people called it home, living in cities that blended Earth architecture with alien landscapes. The planet had oceans colored purple by indigenous algae, mountains that touched the clouds, and fields where human crops grew alongside native plants. Children played in parks, families built businesses, and everyone believed they were creating something lasting. Maria Santos stood in her classroom teaching history to 30 students when the alert came. She was explaining the founding of the American colonies when every screen in the room switched to an emergency broadcast. The calm voice of New Haven's governor filled the air. All citizens should remain calm. The Kresh Empire has issued a territorial claim on New Haven. They are demanding we evacuate the planet within 30 days. The government of Earth is negotiating. Please remain calm. Maria looked at her students, at their frightened faces, and tried to find words of comfort, but she had none. They all knew what negotiations with the Kresh meant. Humanity would file complaints, and the Kresh would do whatever they wanted anyway. Ambassador Chen stood in War Chief Krathik's office aboard his command station. She had come alone against the advice of her security team, because this needed to be a conversation between two people, not a diplomatic incident. "You cannot do this," she said. 3 million people live on New Haven. They have homes, lives, families. You cannot just take their planet. Krathik looked at her with something that might have been amusement. "Ambassador, I can do exactly that. New Haven sits in a strategically valuable location. The Kresh Empire requires it for military purposes. Your people will be compensated fairly for their relocation." "Relocation? Where to what? Every planet humanity has been given is barely habitable. New Haven took 20 years to build into something livable. Then you should have built it somewhere else," Krathik said. He turned back to his command screens, dismissing her. "You have 30 days. I suggest you begin evacuation procedures." Sarah felt something inside her chest that she had kept locked away for 5 years. It was red and hot and wanted to turn this entire station into burning debris, but she pushed it down one more time. "I need more time," she said. 60 days, please." Krathik looked at her again, and now his expression was pure contempt. "You humans are always begging, always asking for more time, more consideration, more mercy. Do you know why we treat you this way, Ambassador? Because you let us. Because you smile and file your pathetic complaints and do nothing. You are weak. You are prey pretending to be predators." He touched a control on his desk. "I am feeling generous today. You have 31 days. Evacuate or my fleet will help motivate your colonists." Dismissed. Sarah walked out of that office with her hands trembling, not from fear, from the effort of keeping them from forming fists, from reaching for Krathik's throat, from unleashing everything humanity had been holding back. On Earth, in the hidden military facilities, Admiral Marcus Stone received word of the ultimatum. He had been preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come, knowing it eventually would. He sent a single encrypted message to every human fleet captain, every colony defense coordinator, every operative who had spent 5 years building humanity's secret response to galactic cruelty. The message said only, "Stand ready." 20 days later, War Chief Krathik decided that 31 days was too generous. Perhaps he was bored. Perhaps he wanted to make an example. Perhaps he simply enjoyed causing pain. Whatever his reason, he moved his fleet into orbit above New Haven and activated his weapons. The first strike hit an orbital station where colonists were gathering supplies for evacuation. 12,000 people died in an instant when the station exploded. The second strike targeted a city center during midday, when streets were full of people going about their lives. Another 8,000 dead. Maria Santos died in her classroom, shielding her students with her body as the ceiling collapsed. Most of the children died anyway. The Kresh fleet stopped firing after the demonstration. Krathik sent a message to New Haven's governor. "You now have 20 days. If I see one human remaining on this planet after that, I will burn every city to ash. Understand that I do not make empty threats." The recording of those strikes traveled to Earth faster than light. Every news station played it. Every human being watched as their people burned. 20,000 dead, civilians, families, children, murdered to make a point. Ambassador Chen requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. She stood in the center of that grand chamber with the recordings displayed above her. The species of the galaxy watched as humans died. They saw the orbital station explode. They saw plasma fire rain down on a city. They saw it all. 20,000 humans are dead, Chen said. Her voice was steady, but every word came out like a blade. War Chief Krathik ordered the murder of civilians to enforce an illegal territorial claim. This is not security. This is not law. This is genocide. The chamber was silent. Then Arbiter Zeltoth spoke. Ambassador Chen, the Council sympathizes with your loss. However, the territory in question is disputed. According to galactic law, disputed territories may be claimed by military force if negotiations fail. We were negotiating. We had 30 days. And you still have 20? Krathak interrupted. He stood at his place, arms crossed. I grew impatient with human delays. I provided motivation. If your people had evacuated faster, those deaths would not have occurred. The responsibility is yours, not mine. Chen looked around the chamber. Not one species spoke in humanity's defense. Not one voice rose to condemn the murder of 20,000 innocents. They just sat there in their comfortable seats watching humans die and calling it legal. She reached up and unpinned her diplomatic insignia from her collar. The small golden earth symbol that she had worn with pride for 5 years. She held it in her hand, felt its weight, and then let it fall to the crystal floor. The sound of it hitting echoed through the massive chamber. For 5 years, Chen said, humanity has been patient. We have absorbed your insults. We have endured your theft. We have buried our dead while filing complaints you never read. We believed in this council. We believed that law and justice meant something in this galaxy. We were wrong. She activated her datapad and transmitted files to every screen in the chamber. 847 complaints. Each one documented. Each one ignored. 5 years of systematic abuse displayed for everyone to see. Every crime is recorded here. Every theft, every murder, every moment you thought we were too weak to matter. We gave you 847 chances to be better. We gave you 5 years to show that this council stood for something. You failed, all of you. Chen turned and looked directly at War Chief Krathak. You asked why we let you treat us this way. You called us weak. You were wrong. We were not weak. We were patient. But our patience has limits. And you, War Chief, you have reached those limits. She looked around the chamber one last time. Humanity is recalling all ambassadors. We are closing all borders. Every non-human in human space has 48 hours to evacuate. After that, consider our smile officially removed. Is that a threat, Ambassador? Krathak asked, and he was laughing now. Will the peaceful humans finally show their teeth? I look forward to it. Chen picked up her insignia from the floor and put it in her pocket. It is not a threat, she said. It is a warning. For 5 years you have mistaken patience for weakness. You are about to learn the difference. And when you do, when you finally understand what humanity is capable of, you will wish you had listened to those 847 complaints. She walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council erupted into discussion. Some species laughed at the humans' dramatic exit. Some expressed concern. A few, like Arbiter Zeltoth, felt a cold sensation of fear creeping up their spines. Only he seemed to understand what was about to happen. Only he recognized the look in Chen's eyes, the tone of her voice. It was not anger. Anger was hot and quick to fade. This was something colder, something that had been forged over 5 years of injustice, something that would not stop until it had burned through everything that caused it. The countdown had reached 0. Humanity's patience had ended. Their wrath had begun. War Chief Krathak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Pride of Kresh, feeling satisfied with himself. The humans had shown their anger at last, but anger without power was just noise. He had already ordered his fleet to prepare for the final assault on New Haven. Let the humans watch as he took what he wanted. Let them learn their place. Sir, we are detecting unusual activity in human space, his sensor officer reported. Multiple vessels emerging from faster-than-light travel. Krathak barely glanced at the reports. Probably evacuation ships. Let them run. We will deal with stragglers after we secure New Haven. Sir, these are not civilian vessels. They are reading as military class. Over 200 contacts and counting. Now Krathak paid attention. He turned to look at the tactical display and felt his confidence waver. Red markers were appearing across the screen, each one representing a human warship. But the numbers made no sense. Humanity was limited to 50 vessels by treaty. He was looking at 4 times that number. Where did they come from? He demanded. His tactical officer's voice was uncertain. They appear to have been civilian ships, sir. But they are transforming, reconfiguring their hulls, activating weapon systems we did not know they possessed. Admiral Marcus Stone sat in the command chair of the UHSF Remembrance, watching as his fleet completed its deployment. For 5 years, humanity had built this force in secret. Every colony ship carried hidden weapon pods. Every mining vessel had concealed armor plating. Every transport could become a warship in 30 minutes. The galaxy had been so convinced of human weakness that they never looked closely at what humanity was building. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral," his communications officer said. "We have positive locks on every Kresh military installation in this sector." Marcus looked at the list of targets displayed on his screen. 40 Kresh bases, each one marked with dates and crimes. This base had processed stolen human cargo. That station had launched the raiders who killed Captain Rodriguez's crew. The orbital platform over New Haven, where Krathak's flagship waited, had fired the shots that murdered 20,000 civilians. "Transmit the message," Marcus ordered. Across every Kresh communication channel, on every frequency, a broadcast began. It showed the face of a human admiral, and behind him, the recordings of 5 years of Kresh crimes played on repeat. The theft, the harassment, the murders, all of it documented, time-stamped, preserved. Marcus spoke with the calm tone of someone reading a grocery list. "To the Kresh Empire, for 5 years you have violated treaties. For 5 years you have murdered our people. We gave you 847 chances to stop. You chose not to. You called us weak. You called us prey. You were wrong." He gestured to the display showing the deployment of human forces. "You had 5 years to learn who we are. You are not paying attention. We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden boats. We are the species that split atoms and walked on moons before we knew if we could survive it. We are the species that does not forget, and we are the species whose patience, once exhausted, becomes something you cannot stop." Marcus leaned forward. "Every crime is documented. Every stolen ship, every murdered crew, every broken treaty. We remember all of it, and now we respond. You wanted to see human teeth. Look closely. The human fleet opened fire simultaneously. 40 Kresh military bases faced bombardment from vessels they had dismissed as civilian transports. The Kresh had built their bases assuming no one would dare attack them. They had not prepared for an enemy that had spent 5 years studying their weaknesses, mapping their defenses, and planning the perfect strike. War Chief Krathak watched in horror as his flagship's shields collapsed under concentrated fire from 20 human vessels. His crew scrambled to return fire, but the humans moved with precision that suggested they knew exactly where every weapon system was located. They knew because they had been documenting everything, studying everything, preparing for this exact moment. "All ships, defensive formation," Krathak roared. "Show these humans what Kresh warriors can do." His fleet tried. Kresh warriors were born for battle, trained from childhood, equipped with the finest weapons their empire could produce. They should have crushed the human fleet. They had more experience, more firepower, more numbers in this sector, but the humans fought with something the Kresh had never encountered. They fought with cold calculation. Every human ship moved as if following a script written years ago. Every attack targeted systems that should have been hidden. Every defense anticipated Kresh tactics before they happened. Captain James Rodriguez, now commanding a human destroyer, led a strike team against the station that had seized his ship and killed his crew. He knew the name of every person he had lost. He had their pictures displayed on his personal screen, a reminder of why he was here. "Target their docking bay," he ordered. "Disable, don't destroy. I want survivors." His crew looked at him with surprise. They expected revenge to be hot and brutal, but James knew better. The captain who had murdered his crew needed to stand trial, needed to face justice, needed to see that humanity was better than the Kresh even in war. The destroyer's weapons carved through the station's defenses with surgical precision. Marines launched from drop pods, breaching the hull and securing sections one by one. They met fierce resistance, but human soldiers had trained for 5 years with a dedication born from watching their people die. Every Marine wore a patch with numbers on it, the numbers of dead civilians, the reminder of why they fought. Within 6 hours, the station was secured. The Kresh captain who had laughed while murdering Rodriguez's crew was found in his quarters, trying to escape through a ventilation shaft. James had him brought to the bridge and read him his rights according to human military law. The captain looked confused. The Kresh did not give rights to defeated enemies. Across the sector, the same scene repeated. Human forces struck with overwhelming precision, crippled Kresh defenses, and then offered surrender terms. The Kresh, expecting slaughter, found themselves facing an enemy that fought with controlled fury. Humans killed when necessary but preferred to capture. They destroyed military targets but went out of their way to avoid civilian casualties. They fought a war with rules that the Kresh did not understand. War Chief Krathak's flagship was dying around him. His shields were gone. His weapons were offline. His crew was abandoning stations as life support failed. He stood alone on the bridge as human Marines breached the final door. "Kill me," he told them. "I will not surrender to prey." The Marine commander removed her helmet, revealing the face of a woman who had lost her sister in the New Haven attack. "You do not get to choose," she said. "You are under arrest for war crimes. You will face trial. You will answer for every crime, every murder, every theft, and you will do it in front of the galaxy that let you act this way." Krathak lunged at her, preferring death to humiliation. She sidestepped, and 2 other Marines stunned him with non-lethal weapons. He collapsed to the deck, unconscious but alive. They would drag him to face justice whether he wanted it or not. The Battle of Kresh Space lasted 3 weeks. The human fleet moved from target to target with mechanical efficiency. They had planned every strike, war-gamed every scenario, prepared for every contingency. The Kresh Empire threw everything they had at the humans, including their legendary elite guard. The elite guard died first. Humans had studied Kresh tactics for 5 years and knew them better than the Kresh knew themselves. On Earth, the people watched the war unfold with mixed emotions. There was satisfaction in seeing justice delivered. There was sorrow for the necessity of it. But most of all, there was a grim determination. This was not a war of conquest. This was a war to make sure that what happened to humanity never happened to anyone else again. The Galactic Council called for a ceasefire. Humanity ignored them. They had listened to the Council for 5 years and received nothing but empty words. Now they would speak in actions the galaxy could not ignore. Ambassador Chen, no longer an ambassador but now High Commissioner for Human Affairs, sent a response to the Council's ceasefire request. "We will stop when the Kresh Empire surrenders unconditionally and submits to investigation for crimes against humanity. Not before. You had your chance to enforce justice through law. You failed. Now you will watch as we enforce it through strength." 6 months after the war began, the Kresh Empire sued for peace. Their military was shattered. Their economy was collapsing. Their allies had abandoned them, unwilling to face human wrath themselves. War Chief Krathak's replacement came to the negotiation table with none of his predecessor's arrogance. The human delegation included Captain Rodriguez, survivors from New Haven, and families of those murdered over the past 5 years. They sat across from the Kresh leaders and presented terms that were not negotiable. "You will pay reparations," Marcus Stone said. "You will surrender war criminals for trial. You will cede territories taken from humanity, and you will live with the knowledge that you created this. Every human ship you see, every base we build, every weapon we deploy exists because you taught us that patience has limits." The Kresh signed. They had no choice. The alternative was complete destruction, and the humans had made it clear they were willing to deliver that if necessary. The Galactic Council chamber looked the same as it had 2 years ago. The dome still displayed 1,000 stars. The crystal floor still gleamed. The seats still held representatives from species across this section of space. But everything had changed. Sarah Chen walked through the chamber again, but this time no one looked at her with contempt. Now they watched her with fear, respect, and in some cases something that might have been shame. She was no longer an ambassador begging for scraps. She was the High Commissioner of Reconciliation, and she carried the weight of humanity's anger and humanity's justice with her. The Great Three sat in their places, but they sat differently now. War Chief Krathak's throne was occupied by War Leader Sheth, a younger Kresh who had not participated in the crimes against humanity. The Valian Consortium sent a representative instead of their merchant prince, unwilling to face human judgment directly. Only Arbiter Xeltoth remained from the old guard, and he looked decades older than he had 2 years ago. Sarah stood at the center of the chamber with a data file in her hands. It was thick, heavier than it should be for simple information because it contained 5 years of documented crimes, every complaint that had been ignored, every theft that had been dismissed, every murder that had been called an unfortunate incident. "This council failed," Sarah said without preamble. "For 5 years, humanity brought evidence of systematic abuse. For 5 years, you looked away. You told us to be patient. You told us to follow procedures. You told us that justice would come. You lied." Around the chamber, representatives shifted uncomfortably. Some tried to meet her eyes and failed. Others stared at their desks. Only Arbiter Zeltoth looked directly at her, and in his expression she saw genuine remorse. "We are not here to destroy this council," Sarah continued. "We are here to rebuild it. Because the galaxy needs law. It needs justice. But it needs law that works and justice that actually protects those who cannot protect themselves." She transmitted the data file to every representative. "These are humanity's demands. They are not negotiable. The Kresh Empire will pay reparations to every human family affected by their crimes. They will surrender territories taken illegally. They will submit their military to inspections to ensure they do not rebuild their capacity for aggression." War leader Sheth stood. He was young for a Kresh leader, barely 40 in human years, but he had the bearing of someone who had learned hard lessons. "The Kresh accept these terms," he said. "We have already begun the process. Our people are learning what our pride cost us. It is a lesson written in blood, but we will not forget it." Sarah nodded. "The Valian Consortium will repay all unfair tariffs collected from human merchants. They will open their trade networks to human goods without discrimination. They will submit to oversight to ensure they do not repeat their exploitation." The Valian representative clicked his multiple arms together in a gesture of agreement. "The consortium accepts. We have already begun financial transfers. We understand that trust must be rebuilt." But Sarah was not done. She turned to face the entire council. "And this body, this Galactic Council, will implement what humanity calls the Patience Accords. Every species, no matter how small or new, will have their complaints heard and investigated. Violations of treaties will not be ignored. Justice will not be delayed." She pulled up a display showing a new system. 3 strikes. Any species or empire that violates galactic law receives a formal warning and investigation. A second violation brings sanctions and oversight. A third violation brings intervention. No more endless complaints that vanish into bureaucracy. No more patient suffering while the powerful do as they please. 3 chances to correct behavior. 3 strikes. Then consequences. And who enforces these consequences? Arbiter Zeltoth asked. His tone was not challenging, but genuinely curious. "Who watches the watchers, as humans say?" Sarah smiled, but it was not a warm expression. "Humanity will. We have learned that we cannot trust the galaxy to police itself. So we will build a peacekeeping force, open to volunteers from all species, trained in human methods, operating under human command. We will be the enforcement arm that this council never had." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species objected to human oversight. Others worried about human power growing too large. But many, especially the smaller species that had suffered in silence like humanity once did, voiced their support. A representative from a species humanity had never heard of stood. She was small, bird-like, with feathers that shimmered blue. "The cheery people support this," she said, her voice translator giving her words a musical quality. "For decades, the Valians have exploited our trade routes. We filed complaints. No one listened. If the humans had not acted, we would still be suffering. We trust them to do what this council could not." More species added their voices. Sarah listened to stories of abuse and neglect that sounded painfully familiar. The galaxy had more victims than just humanity. They had all been waiting for someone to stand up and say enough. Humanity had said it. Now others found courage to speak. The vote came. The Patience Accords passed with 72% approval. The council would be reformed. Justice would have teeth. And humanity would make sure those teeth bit when necessary. But there were still trials to be held. War Chief Krathak was brought to New Haven Colony, now rebuilt and stronger than before. The trial took place in a courtroom built on the exact spot where a school had been destroyed by Kresh bombardment. The walls displayed the names of all 20,000 humans who died in the attack. Krathak sat in chains, his armor stripped away, his pride shattered. He looked at the humans surrounding him and finally understood what he had created. These were not prey. They had never been prey. They were a species that believed in law and justice so strongly that when those things failed, they became the law and justice themselves. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. Krathak was given every legal right and protection that he had never afforded to his victims. At the end, the judges found him guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced him to life imprisonment. But the prison was not what he expected. It was not a cell. It was a colony, the very colony he had tried to destroy. He would spend the rest of his life living among humans, working with them, seeing what they were building. He would watch as New Haven grew and prospered. He would see human children playing in parks named after those he killed. He would live with the knowledge that he tried to destroy something beautiful and failed. It was, he came to understand, a far worse punishment than death. Captain James Rodriguez stood on the bridge of his new ship, the UHSF Justice. It was not a warship despite carrying weapons. It was a patrol vessel, part of the new peacekeeping force that humanity was building. His crew was mixed species now, including 3 Kresh who had refused to follow Krathak's orders and deserted rather than murder civilians. "Captain, we are receiving a distress call," his communications officer reported. "A Cheery merchant vessel is under attack by pirates." James looked at his tactical display. The Cheery ship was outgunned and would not survive long. 2 years ago, no one would have responded to such a call. Pirates were a fact of life in the frontier. Small species suffered because they could not defend themselves. But things had changed. "All hands to battle stations," James ordered. "Plot an intercept course. Let's show these pirates that the frontier is not lawless anymore." The Justice arrived in time to save the Cheery vessel. The pirates, seeing human colors, fled immediately. They had heard the stories. They knew what happened to those who crossed humanity now. James escorted the Cheery ship to safety and refused payment for the rescue. "This is what the peacekeeping force does," he told the grateful Cheery captain. "We protect those who need it. We enforce the law. And we remember what it is like to be the ones crying for help while no one listens." On Earth, in a small house in the mountains, Sarah Chen sat on her porch watching the sunset. She had retired after the Patience Accords passed, exhausted from years of carrying humanity's anger. Now she lived quietly, tending a garden and writing a history of what had happened. Sometimes young diplomats came to visit her seeking advice. They asked her how to handle difficult negotiations, how to deal with species that saw humanity as aggressive now instead of weak. She always told them the same thing. "Remember why we fought," she would say. "Not for conquest, not for revenge, though we wanted it. We fought so that no species would ever again suffer what we suffered. We fought to make the law mean something. Never forget that. The moment we become what the Kresh were, we lose everything we fought for." In the council chamber, a new memorial stood. It was simple, just a wall with writing on it. On one side were the 847 complaints humanity had filed, each one preserved and displayed. On the other side were the names of the 15,247 humans who died because those complaints were ignored. Above the memorial, words were carved in every language the galaxy spoke. "We tried peace. We tried patience. We tried law. Remember this monument and understand that justice delayed is justice denied. Never again." Arbiter Zeltoth visited the memorial often.